From the nation's capital, all sides, all the time, I'm Robbie Alampay.
And I'm Gretchen Hall. The big story tonight.
A health expert says COVID-19 in the Philippines is now reaching the endemic stage.
The health department, though, is cautious on officially declaring this as booster coverage in the country remains slow. JC Cosico with the big story.
The country is seeing a slight uptick in COVID-19 cases according to the health department. The DOH reports average daily infection increased from 907 to over 1,200 in the recent week. Despite this, infectious disease expert Dr. Salvana said the Philippines is heading towards a COVID endemic stage.
Mukhang nagiging endemic na siya in the sense na magsisirculate na yan parang sipon, hindi na siya talaga mawawala ng todo. And so, parang sa mga ganitong klaseng illnesses, meron talagang fluctuations in the number of cases.
However, the health department is still uncertain about this.
We can say that yes, endemicity will come, soon. Pero sa ngayon, it's quite uncertain because of this immunity that we are talking about. We are not certain and cannot be confident to say kasi nga mababa ang immunity ngayon because of the booster coverage which is low and the effect of the subvariants to our immunity in the population.
To improve vaccine coverage, the DOH is planning to hold another special vaccination program on the first week of December. In the meantime, the DOH is looking to introduce changes to the COVID-19 alert level system.
So we'd like to decouple these restrictions from this alert level system kung saan ang alert level system gagamitin na lang ito ng ating bansa parang pag-asa storm signals na lang siya. Nasasabihin na sa'yo, signal number 4 tayo ngayon.
The DOH will also propose to President Bongbong Marcos to extend the state of calamity declaration if the public health emergency bill will not be signed by December.
Even though there is no state of calamity declaration or public health emergency declaration, we can still continue on to implement our vaccination program. We can still do expedited procurement. We can still do the other things that we are doing right now for this pandemic.
With the holiday season just around the corner, health experts continue to remind the public to be cautious in gatherings to prevent the spread of COVID-19. For News 5, JC Cosico, we are One News.
Just how near is the country to reaching the endemic stage of COVID? To give us the answers, we have with us on the show Dr. Salvana, Director of the Institute of Molecular Biology and Biotechnology at the National Institutes of Health. Good evening, Dr. Salvana. Welcome to the big story.
Yeah, good evening, Robbie. Good evening, Gretchen. Good evening to everyone who's watching.
Okay, sir. Again, run us through it again. What do we need to see to say safely that we are already at the endemic stage, and what exactly will that mean?
Right. So important to understand that endemic doesn't mean harmless. Endemic means that we can more or less predict the impact of a disease on our society, like dengue, like tuberculosis, those are diseases that have a real death toll every year, but it is already predictable. It wasn't like if you look back 2 years ago when we didn't know much about COVID, we didn't know how many people were going to die. We didn't know how it was being transmitted. We didn't have any vaccines. We didn't have any treatment. So we have a very different situation now where we can actually now predict, and we can also see that with vaccination and with masking, we've been able to keep the numbers of people in the hospitals quite low. And so we're headed towards that. We're not quite there yet because, there's still some uncertainty with some of these variants. And of course, as we draw down our public health standards, we have to be ready for any spikes in admissions in the hospital. But it really is headed towards there. The first time we started to think about this was actually January of this year, when we had a very high Omicron caseload. It was about 2 or 3 times higher than the Delta number of cases, but we had half of the deaths of Delta. So what that tells you is that the impact of COVID was already starting to decrease, and we continue to see sustained decreases in the severe number of cases. There were only 6 severe cases out of all the cases from last week. And also we see that our healthcare system, our healthcare capacity is not being overwhelmed.
Okay, but Dr. Salvana, how concerned should we still be about our levels of having booster shots? Or as we talk about endemicity, are we past that conversation?
Right. Well, for booster shots, the important target for booster shots are really those that are most vulnerable. We want at least 1 booster shot for anybody above 12 years old. We want 2 booster shots for those above 60 years old. The US has actually kind of changed that already with the bivalent vaccines coming in, where they just recommend that 1 bivalent booster is enough for everyone, even those 60 and above. But the truth is, our old vaccines continue to protect against severe disease. It's very clear that there haven't been really any spikes in the number of deaths. We see that the severe disease numbers remain low. The problem really is that because of the variants, you do see spikes in cases, but if you're vaccinated, even if you get COVID, most likely it's going to be mild.
Okay, one of the challenges that has surfaced with the recent variants XBB and XBC has been waning immunity of the vaccines. Given that we have low booster coverage and given also the trends in terms of how responsive we are to the vaccines and to the new variants of COVID, what should we be worried about, and what are the trends that we should expect moving forward?
Well, we're talking about 2 things when you say waning immunity. So there's waning immunity in terms of protection from infection because the antibodies are going down. And that does happen, especially with a mismatch with the new variants. But again, the boosters do that with the bivalent vaccines. That's probably going to improve. But the immunity against severe disease does not seem to be waning, actually. As long as we've had 1 booster, we don't see any sudden increases in the number of severe cases, because even though the variants are starting to escape from the vaccines in terms of infection, they're not escaping from that part of the vaccine that protects us against severe disease. These are from the T cells, which are a lot more robust in terms of continuing to provide severe protection from severe infection.
Okay, assuming that we are near or already at endemicity, what might that mean in terms of policies, or at least policy options for government and, for that matter, the private sector?
Yeah, I mean, there's really no distinct point in time where you go from non-endemic to endemic. It really is kind of a continuum. Of course, our lead institution that will say that it's endemic or not will still be the WHO. And they actually met in October to decide on that. And they said, nah, not yet. We're not going to declare it yet. But even WHO Director General Tedros said it's near, but not yet at that time in October. And so rather than having a complete shift from, on to off, it's really going to be a gradual transition. And we're already doing those things. Like right now, we're starting to relax the mask mandates, capacities are high, and then DOH OIC Secretary Vergere is talking about decoupling the alert level systems from the restrictions, precisely because we've been changing the restrictions as we go along, because we're seeing that with a high level of vaccination, healthcare capacity is not suffering so much. And so we've slowly decreased the restrictions even within the alert level systems. And then to the point where when people get used to the idea that, if there's a lot of virus going around, or if you're vulnerable, then you can choose to increase your protection by wearing a mask, and if it's available, getting the bivalent vaccine. So it's really moving the onus from government and giving the responsibility to people, because we've had enough time to get to know what this virus is, and we have firm recommendations. So instead of saying you have to do this, you have to do that, it's going to be like, COVID will always be with us. These are the things that we can do to protect ourselves. And you decide, especially when the cases are high or if you're vulnerable, how much of these interventions you want to continue doing.
I truly hope it continues on that trajectory and we get ourselves out of the tunnel. Maraming salamat po, Dr. Edsel Salvana, Director of the Institute of Molecular Biology and Biotechnology at the National Institute of Health. Meanwhile, Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Sen tested positive for COVID-19. This comes just a few days after he met with Philippine President Bongbong Marcos Jr. and other world leaders during the 40th and 41st ASEAN summits. Hun Sen on Tuesday bared he tested positive after arriving in Indonesia for the G20 summit. The Prime Minister said he plans to return to Cambodia on Tuesday evening. Malacanang meanwhile said that Marcos Jr. had himself tested as part of the health protocols for the 2022 APEC summit in Bangkok, Thailand. However, the result of the test was not disclosed. After the break, we'll discuss the approved 2023 budget of the Department of Education with Senator Koko Pimentel. That and more when the big story returns. Keep it here on One News.
Breakdown of crypto exchange FTX.com has a lot of folks questioning not just what went wrong, but why it happened so fast in the first place. In a word, liquidity. It's the backbone of every marketplace out there. Look at it this way. Say I had this can of beans. I think it's worth $2.
You're watching the big story here on One News. The 2023 budget for both the Office of the Vice President and the Education Department have hurdled the Senate. That, despite some senators voicing concerns over the millions of pesos in confidential funds allocated for both offices. Camille Samonte with the story.
The Office of the Vice President as well as the Department of Education hurdled budget debates in the Senate. The Senate has approved the proposed 2023 budget of DepEd amounting to over 667 billion pesos, while the OVP's proposed budget is at 2.3 billion pesos. Both the budget of the OVP and DepEd for next year include an appropriation for confidential funds worth 500 million pesos and 150 million pesos respectively. But the minority bloc said it will fight for the deletion and realignment of the said confidential funds. In the plenary debate, Senator Risa Hontiveros insisted that the money should be used avenues for more pressing concerns in the education sector.
I hope that our colleagues in the Senate will share the view that there are no extraordinarily compelling reasons to provide a confidential fund to the education agency.
Senate Minority Leader Koko Pimentel meanwhile said Congress should instead rechannel the funds for more important programs and allow agencies to perform their mandate.
I will still maintain, Mr. Chairman, that tayo naman gumawa ng mga definition ng confidential fund. Tayo rin gumawa ng definition ng confidential expenses. Per our own definition, per Congress's own definition of confidential funds, the Office of the Vice President is not entitled or should not be given confidential funds. That is my position.
Pimentel also noted that VP Sara Duterte's requested budget is more than thrice than the 2022 budget of her predecessor, former Vice President Leni Robredo. The Senate Committee on Finance, however, retained both amounts for the offices headed by the Vice President, despite Duterte's earlier pronouncement that she's leaving to Congress a decision on the final allocation. For News 5, Camille Samonte, We Are One News.
How does the Senate minority plan to delete these confidential funds now that budgets for both the OVP and DepEd have been approved by the upper house? Let's get the answers from Senator Koko Pimentel, who is joining us over the line. Good evening, Senator Koko Pimentel. Welcome to The Big Story.
Magandang gabi po, Gretchen, Robbie, and to all of your viewers and listeners.
Your thoughts on the approval of the confidential funds, and is there anything that the opposition can do now to be able to look into these, possibly block them, or still be able to create some opposition towards the implementation?
Yes, if you note the words used by the majority leader when terminating the interpellation for the different agencies, what we use is that the budget is now endorsed to the plenary. Hindi pa siya approved actually because we are in the period of interpellations. And then we will now, after everything is closed, then we will go to the period of amendments. Yun na po yun. After the period of amendments, yun na po yung we can say that the budget is being approved. So, it's not yet too late. Yung aming mga manifestations that we intend to amend, we will do that in the period of amendments.
Okay, in the meantime, Senator, it will be, of course, an uphill climb. Napakakaunti ng opposition sa Senado. But kanina sinabi nyo, Kongreso ang nag-define ng confidential funds, and therefore, based on that, you said there is basis, based on that definition, na the OVP is not entitled to these funds as you yourself, as Congress itself defined. Can you get us into that a little bit deeper? What exactly in Congress's definition of confidential funds can you invoke?
We have defined confidential fund to be a fund for surveillance activities which the agency needs to do pursuant to its mandate or operations. When we talk about the Office of the Vice President, what is the mandate of the Vice President? Nahanap po yan sa Constitution. Ang sabi ng Constitution, ang mandato o trabaho ng Vice President ay maghanda na maging presidente at any time. Yan lang po yun. That is the mandate. Actually, wala na ng ibang trabaho yan kasi pwedeng yan bigyan ng trabaho, pero ang gagamitin ng Vice President kung binigyan siya ng trabaho ng presidente, will be the budget of the department kung saan siya na-appoint.
Okay.
So yun po yun. So with that reasoning, I'm convinced that the Office of the Vice President is not entitled or cannot be given confidential funds.
Okay, but to that point, Senator, you did mention kung binigyan ng trabaho yung Vice President. In this case, the Vice President is in fact concurrently also the Secretary of Education. That has also asked and that has also asked and approved or at least an endorsed budget, confidential funds as well for the Department of Education. On that particular hat, do you have any opposition to that with regards to the confidential funds sought and approved for the Secretary of Education?
Of Education naman. Because what is now the mandate o trabaho ng Department of Education? Ano sagot dyan? Sa pangalan, makikita na natin, ipaaral, turuan ang ating mga kabataan, i-maintain ang ating mga eskwelahan. Yan ang mandato ng Department of Education. So, bakit kakailanganin ng Department of Education ng confidence fund para sa surveillance activities to support its mandate or operations? Kung yung mga surveillance activities, ibigay na natin yung sa kapulisan, sa NBI, sa PIDEA, kung ano pa man yung mga law enforcement agencies natin.
Senator,
So, hindi pa rin po justified. Lalo na kung marinig natin yung budget wish list ng Department of Education. Ang dami pa nilang kailangan bigyan ng pundo. Lampas-lampas pa po sa 150 million pesos. And then, nag-set aside pa tayo ng 150 million pesos pang confidential. Hindi naman priority yun. At saka hindi nga talaga common sense na expenditure yun ng isang Department of Education na bigyan ka ng pera para surveillance.
Okay, Senator, assuming that the confidential funds get through the Senate, approved by the President, what safeguards can we place, or are there any measures that you can file to look into these confidential funds, may it be for the Office of the Vice President or other agencies in general, just moving forward to be able to make sure that our money is used for the right purposes and the right reasons?
Number one, we will appeal to COA to siguro observe a heightened review of the confidential and intelligence funds. Although, kaya nga ginawang confidential and intelligence funds yan, para nga yung auditing ng COA ay mas relaxed, hindi ganun ka-heightened. So, manawagan siguro tayo na yung review nila, gawin nilang heightened review. And then, of course, mag-appeal na lang tayo sa mga taong merong confidential funds to use the funds wisely.
Okay, maraming salamat po. Senator Koko Pimentel. And still to come, subpoenas have been issued to persons of interest in the killing of broadcaster Percy Lapid. We will get the latest on that when the big story returns. Keep it here on One News.
The end of the war. Of course, you see our strong army. We are step by step coming to our country, to all the temporary occupied territories, and of course it's a pity, but it's a long way, difficult way, because this war took the best heroes of our country, and so but for us, it's very understandable. We don't believe Russia, yes, and they are tricking with all the world. That's why we are going forward. We're ready for peace, but our peace for our country is all our country, all our territory. We respect the law and respect sovereignty of all the countries, but now we are speaking about our countries. That's why we are fighting against Russian aggression. The Heimers, you know that it's high level of the level what we have from our partners, and we are really thankful for Joe Biden and for Congress and for all support. Not only USA, you understand that all Europe help us too very much. So thank you very much. All this victory is possible when all the world is around our country. So thank you again.
Sustainability, resilience, and security. So many big global issues that today's leaders are facing. We're here in Singapore for the New Economy Forum to talk through some of these issues and try to come up with some solutions.
First and foremost at the top of the list is the cost of food and energy globally. How on earth do we bring that down? Is there a way to relieve the pressure that countries in the emerging markets feel because the currencies are so weak against the US dollar and it costs them that much more to buy food and energy that's in short supply? Number two, I would say, is the rising tension level between the United States and China. And how is that going to play out regionally? How is that going to play out in terms of security? We know that there's this existential question hanging over Taiwan, but the potential ramifications are much, much wider than just what happens to Taiwan and what happens to semiconductors. And number three, I would say, is this uncertain future for sustainable investing. It's going to take something like $150 trillion to get to net zero by 2050. Are the people who have and manage the world's capital still committed to getting there and spending all that money when it now requires a much higher return on investment to beat the rate that you get on simple fixed income?
So all of those three are huge, huge problems. What do we hope to take away from the New Economy Forum? Are we going to talk about it? Will there be a plan at the end? What do we get out of this?
Look, nobody would be happier than me if we came out of the New Economy Forum with a set of, at the very...
You are still watching The Big Story here on One News. Personalities linked to Percy Lapid's murder have formally been summoned to attend preliminary hearings on the case. Justin Punsalang with this report.
The subpoena for BuCor Superintendent Ricardo Zulueta was left tucked at the gate of his home in Bulacan. As of Tuesday morning, the house was empty and locked. Zulueta is among the suspects in the murder of broadcaster Percy Lapid. Over in Caloocan, no one likewise received the document for suspended BuCor Chief Gerald Bantag. The barangay chairman said it's been years since he last saw the general.
Matagal na, yung huli lang, yung na-promote siya na BuCor, yung nag-gratulate ko pa siya. Yun lang yung last na ano namin.
Prosecutor Charlie Guhit said the subpoena was served to the last known address of Bantag, but they will send another one to the new address that will be provided. Bantag's lawyer Rocky Balisong said they may send it to Baguio City.
Alam naman nila na taga Baguio si General Bantag. Kung wala doon sa last known address, then at least naman ihanap naman nila kung saan nila pwedeng i-serve.
Balisong added that they have been waiting for the documents so they can formally air their side in the court. Hearing into the case have been set on November 23 and December 5. Percy's brother, Roy Mabasa, can't help but question Bantag's sincerity since the embattled general did not bother to receive the subpoena.
Well, akala ko ba sinasabi ni Ginoong Bantag na siya ay handang harapin itong mga aligasyon laban sa kanya, no? Kaya nga nagtataka tayo kung totoo ba na sincero si Ginoong Bantag. Mukhang hindi naman Dahil dyan sa mag-receive pa lamang ng subpoena.
For News 5, Justine Punsalang. We are One News.
Let's now take a closer look at the controversial tunnel found at the Bilibid grounds. Mobile journalist Julie Baiza gives us a front seat to the story.
Diving pool or escape tunnel. These are just some of the speculations surrounding this mysterious tunnel right at the new Bilibid prison grounds. 30 meters deep and 200 meters wide, the tunnel is almost as big as a football field. It's also located right by the director's quarters or the office formerly occupied by suspended BuCor Chief Gerald Bantag. The vicinity of the tunnel has been fenced off, but the two backhoes used in the excavation are still here. Up close, the sheer height of the tunnel is remarkable, and going down the actual dig site proved to be a challenge.
Nandito tayo ngayon sa loob ng hukay o tunnel sa New Bilibid Prison. Kung makikita nyo, nilulumot na itong paligid. Maputik din, actually malambot yung lupa kasi umulan kanina. Tapos marami mga bitak-bitak na bato at hindi natapos sukayin.
The Bureau of Corrections says the excavation started during General Bantag's time in office. BuCor OIC Gregorio Catapang also speculated that the digging might have been done to mine diamonds or gold, since the Bilibid area was previously used as a Japanese-American camp. The BuCor has sought the help of DANR to look into the illegal quarrying happening in the area. Mobile journalist Julie Baiza, We Are One News.
And that's the big story tonight. For more updates, follow News 5, the Philippine Star, and Business World online. You may also log on to onenews.ph for more analysis. Ako po si Robbie Alampay.
The big story is also available via Signal Play app. Make a free account now at signalplay.com and stream One News anytime, anywhere. Ako po si Gretchen Ho. Stay safe, Philippines.
We are One News, all sides, all the time.